keeping up pressure on the longtime U.S. nemesis and provoking defiant words from the island's leadership. Venezuela is keeping provoking defiant words from the island's leadership. Venezuela is keeping
All right. Good gracious. Good gracious. Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, the 11th day of February, 2026. Welcome to Breaking Health Barriers. I'm Dr. Jack Stockwell here at K-Talk as well as on the stream this morning. A lot of things I want to talk to you about. This is the only 2-hour program of the week, and I have plenty for you because I want to give you a little primer on measles and what the heck is going on around this country with this big measles scare and the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated, and how it's all the unvaccinated people that are causing all the problems, which of course is nonsense. And I want to get into that and explain some things that they are not talking about. So anytime you can scare people, the last thing you need when you scare people would be the facts. And if you can avoid the facts, then you can put together a pretty good scare program. And people operate from two primary stimuli in their life. One is money and the other one is fear. And if you can control both of those, you have the population pretty well under your control. So I want to get into, because it's Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day doesn't focus on the brain or the gut or even your common sense. It focuses on the heart. I want to do a little heart review today as well. And we have a Valentine's Day sale for supplements coming up this weekend. It starts Saturday at 12 a.m. and goes until Monday at midnight. And as usual, it's 15% off the supplements during that period of time, this Saturday morning until Monday midnight. And also the half thing is going on still. Thursdays are supposed to be my days off. Tomorrow I am full of new patients who are coming in at the half price special. I talked to a patient yesterday. I said, it's interesting how people will shop for their health based on money. And she pointed out some things to me that I wasn't really thinking about it. I think is really critical to the whole thing. And that is the fact that times are tough. And because of the cost of living, people have to choose what seems to be the most important at the time, and putting up with their pain, living in pain, isn't that important as making sure all the bills are covered. And I can't argue that. But you don't have to go on living in pain. Two people I saw yesterday that I started on 2 weeks ago, just absolutely amazed at how much better they are feeling. And with very little, really dead air. All right, hold on a second here. According to my computer here, I am according to this, I am connected to the computer. All right, I'm terribly sorry. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. It's just, according to this, I'm connected. Let's see here. All right. Yes, I'm speaking on my mic. Yes, I'm speaking on my mic. Let's turn that off. Let's just turn that off. Yes, I'm speaking on my mic. Good gracious. Hopefully that's coming to an end here pretty quick. My goodness. Well, there's your entertainment for the morning. Somebody who's about to start their 32 years in radio. I still, I'm still trying to keep the buttons clear. All right, I guess I need to start all over again here. All right, thanks, Paul. And I don't know if I'm recording or not because I could not connect with the recorder this morning, Paul, if you're listening. All right, so here we are, several minutes into the stream, already sounding like a fool. But I guarantee you I'm going to give you some good information before this program is over with today. And this is, this isn't all that bad without direction. I kind of have to make it up as I go along, not having direction in what I'm doing. All right, so welcome. It's the 11th day of February 2026. The doctor is in. We are on breaking health barriers this Wednesday morning. Two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about what's really going on with this measles thing across the country. And then I want to talk about the heart again, because a very important heart thing is coming up this coming Saturday, Valentine's Day. And I hope you have taken care of your Valentine. There's no excuse. There's no, thanks, Paul. There's no excuse. There's no getting out of it. Don't forget your Valentine. My goodness. All right. So, and then we have a Valentine's Day sale going on with our supplements. It starts Saturday at 12 a.m., which would be Friday midnight, Saturday 12 a.m. to Monday midnight. 15% off of our supplements. And I would suggest you think about the heart pack. The heart pack is just vital. The number of people that we all know who are succumbing to heart disease, which is completely avoidable. Heart disease is an environmental problem, primarily stemming from malnutrition. The heart simply not getting the nutrition it needs to function. I am 75, and I just finished taking my supplements this morning, which amounts to my breakfast because there's a lot of them. And they are food concentrates. They're not synthetics. They are concentrates from foods. And almost a third of it focuses on my heart, to keep my heart functioning. It's hard to live without your heart. I know a few people I consider to be heartless, but I think they still have a heart beating in their chest. All right, so let's go on from here. One other thing. Oh, the half off special is still going on for new patients. Thursday's my day off, but tomorrow is full of new patients who are trying to take advantage of this half off thing. It was only designed for December. It's just something we do once a year in December. Essentially 2 people for the price of 1, but we, because a lot of people don't know somebody else that would want to come under this kind of care, we just broke it down into half price. So you don't have, it doesn't have to be 2 for 1. You don't have to have a buddy with you. You just need to get scheduled for a consultation, and if there's something we can do for you, fine. There's no charge to sit down and talk for half an hour or so about your symptoms, your history, what's going on with you, what I think I can do for you, if I can do anything at all. And then if you want to become a patient, you're scheduled for me to take care of you, and then we can go from there. But if it's something you don't want to do, we'll still be friends. You can just go on your way. All right, so I want to talk about measles because this thing kind of rears its head every now and then when you just aren't getting these vaccinations that the vaccine industry wants you to get. So there's this new peer-reviewed study from the Independent Medical Alliance reviewing therapeutic candidates for measles, including vitamin A. And why isn't vitamin A a part of the discussion? Interestingly enough, vitamin A is absolutely essential for healthy skin and for the skin to heal and heal quickly due to any kind of damage that might come along. Now, if you've been paying any attention, and I guess it's probably I think maybe it started around summer last year. This huge, irresistible, unstoppable, over-conquering force called measles. If you've been following the news, you can get this idea: a plague is upon us, a plague of measles, and you hear all kinds of words like surges and outbreaks and case counts. You know, just like you were keeping tally of a World Series game as to where the points are coming in. And what they're trying to do with all of this, again, is what I said here at the beginning about two driving forces, money and fear. And they're trying to create fear. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be afraid that you or your children are going to get measles and you're going to die. But there's a part of the story that hardly ever gets into the news. In developed countries like ours, serious complications from measles are very rare. And perhaps most importantly, there are some very powerful therapeutics that help you get over measles very quickly by just underlining the body's ability to have a good immune response to when these things take place. So there's this new peer-reviewed study co-authored by the Independent Medical Alliance president, Dr. Joseph Veron, and Director of Research Matthew Halma, that's adding to a growing body of research that's aimed at what do we do for measles kind of a thing other than medication. And the study was published in Antiviral Research, and this systematic review compiles clinical evidence for treatment options, the kind of information that could help you and could certainly help physicians if they would open their eyes to making informed decisions. And so why is this not a part of the discussion when it's been known in alternative circles for decades? The power of vitamin A, good food-based vitamin A, not beta-carotene, good food-based vitamin A, and its role in helping you have far less symptomatic suffering from the presence of measles, or if you do get measles, a very low intensity and quickly overcome it. Now, this is from the study. This is what the authors said. Adjunctive therapies, including vitamin A, ribavirin, and interferon alpha, and emerging antiviral candidates play an important role in reducing complications. Continued research is urgently needed to validate novel antivirals and immunomodulatory treatments. That just simply means to validate novel antivirals is something outside of an antiviral medication, like food, and the immunomodulatory treatments, like interferon alpha, something your body makes. So the name of the study, an acute management of measles, a systematic review of therapeutic strategies. And the research team analyzed 10 studies on acute measles treatments, including 6 clinical trials. And what they did is they tried to bring together the best available evidence into one single resource. And it's the kind of rigorous review that should inform the conversation about measles, but rarely does, because the measles industry doesn't want you to know this stuff. Because if you know this stuff, then you don't need to go get your measles vaccine. And if you don't get your measles vaccine, then the measles industry loses a good source of cash flow. So before going into the treatments, I want to step back from the headlines for a moment to look at what the measles data actually shows, which does not make the press. Measles mortality, dying from measles, and I've said this on my radio program for 30 years, declined 98% before the vaccine was ever introduced. You know, they were going to create a vaccine for scarlet fever. But scarlet fever was almost it was 100% gone by the time they were talking about a vaccine. Measles was only 2% behind that. Measles cases, as recorded and reported by the CDC in this country, had disappeared by 98% before the vaccine ever showed up. Between 1900 and 1963, the death rate for measles in 1900 was 13.3 per 100,000. In 1963, just before the vaccine showed up, that death rate had dropped from 13.3 per 100,000 to 0.2 per 100,000. And of course, how did that happen? Same thing with polio. Improvements in sanitation, nutrition, and healthcare. And the vaccine arrived after this dramatic decline was already underway. So, outcomes among those who become infected with measles depends heavily on underlying health. Like almost anything else, you can become sick and suffer terribly from. What is the underlying health quotient of your body when you become exposed to something? Why is there somebody in the family that seems to always get sick, whereas there's other people in the family that never seem to get sick? Why is there somebody in the office that's always maximizing their PTO or their sick leave or whatever else, whereas other people in the office are building their PTO up to months? Well, this study notes that the case fatality rates range from 0.1 to 0.3% in high-income countries, 3 to 6% or higher in low-resource settings. What's the difference between higher-income countries and lower-income countries? Nutrition, sanitation, and access to care. But a third variable in all of this that was really not surprising is vitamin A deficiency is a major factor. In the United States, 92% of hospitalized measles patients are vitamin A deficient. 92% of hospitalized measles patients are vitamin A deficient. The study, of course, suggests severe outcomes often reflect underlying nutritional issues rather than just the virus by itself. That's one of the reasons why there's always somebody sick when there's others never. In the office, at home, at church, in your civic groups, your sports buddies, whatever else. But none of this, of what I've said so far, minimizes the reality that measles can be serious for vulnerable individuals, just as COVID was very serious for people who were vulnerable, like those who had comorbidities, and especially children. Children who are very sick or easily sickened to begin with, exposed to measles, are the high-risk group. but even death among them is rare. But it does suggest that this wall-to-wall fear in this country by the media doesn't reflect the actual risk for most people in developed countries. Now, here's what the research shows. Vitamin A supplementation is the most consistently validated therapeutic candidate for measles. I mean, even the World Health Organization recommends it for all children with severe measles infection. And this guidance is often overlooked in the high-income countries, but the data strongly suggests it. Now, I have parents who put their children on chewable Catalin that has vitamin A in it. Or they are taking Cataplex A, which is a good dose of vitamin A. And when parents have started taking care of the immune resilience of their children hardly ever get sick anymore, even when they're in a classroom full of sick kids. A wise parent, when you got a classroom full of sick kids, you're going to keep your kid home anyway. I mean, you have to play with fire just because your child has a strong, resilient immune system. Now, multiple randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses shows that high-dose vitamin A for children and for infants for at least 2 consecutive days significantly reduces measles-related mortality. Now, what about beta-carotene? Because when you buy synthetic vitamin A, you're going to see beta-carotene as the first or at least the second ingredient. Beta-carotene is not vitamin A, even though it says vitamin A on the bottle. Food labeling laws from the FDA allow them to say that. It should say vitamin A precursor, because your body will take beta-carotene and in the small intestines, convert it, if you have healthy intestines, to vitamin A, retinol. Now, benefits that are attributed to vitamin A and its role in maintaining epithelial integrity helps to prevent secondary infections. The epithelial integrity is referring to primarily the lining of tissues, the lining of lungs, and the lining of your skin. And effects are most pronounced in malnourished or deficient populations. But given that 92% of hospitalized U.S. cases are vitamin A deficient, I mean, this is highly relevant domestically because it's so easy to prevent this. Now, the antivirals, ribavirin is a broad-spectrum antiviral that is used off-label in severe and immunocompromised cases. Now, there is no antiviral FDA approved for measles, but 2 have clinical trial support. Ribavirin, well, I just mentioned, and interferon alpha was evaluated in a randomized study of pediatric measles patients. Both are generally reserved for very severe cases, particularly in immunocompromised patients who have difficulty clearing the virus. How long does it take for a healthy patient to clear the measles virus? 2 or 3 days, maybe 4, certainly not more than a week. But a severely immunocompromised pediatric patient suffering from cancer, suffering from some other kind of upper respiratory long-term infections, are going to have a longer period overcoming the measles. But of those that get hospitalized that are in the severely immunocompromised group, 92% of them are vitamin A deficient. Now, there is immunoglobulin, which gives you passive immunity for high-risk individuals, including immunocompromised patients and those who, as I said, cancer, who are on chemotherapy. Remember, if you are on chemotherapy for any kind of cancer, your immune system is severely compromised, which is kind of counterintuitive because it's a compromised immune system that let the cancer take place in the first place. The main cause of cancer is the failure of your immune system to stop it, destroy it, before it gets a foothold. There are those who use antibiotics. And while they are not antiviral, antibiotics are not antiviral. Antibiotics like cotrimexazole play a role in preventing secondary bacterial infections like pneumonia. And this is one of the worries that patients have been programmed with. If their child gets measles and their fever gets high enough and they're sick enough, it could progress to pneumonia, so they should run out and get a measles vaccine as soon as possible. When even the basic instruction we have about vaccines is you never give a vaccine to a sick person. Why? Because vaccinations are immunocompromising. When you inject all those chemicals into the body, your immune system goes haywire. Because you're flooding the body with stuff that is not self. You're flooding the body with a mixture of chemicals. See, some people think, that there's active live virus measles vaccines and dead virus measles vaccines. And remember, viruses aren't alive anyway. Once again, I turn you to the cdc.gov, search out viruses, and on the first page, the introductory information on viruses in the CDC's website, the very first sentence, viruses are non-living entities. What does non-living mean? Well, it kind of means they're not alive. Well, how can they multiply? How can they get to be so many? Because they're exosomes released from a sick or dying cell that can release hundreds of thousands of these things from one cell. What are they doing? They're warning the rest of the system. Immunocompromise taking place. So you kind of turn back to basic nutrition to underscore the body's ability to fight what these little exosomes are warning you about. And then, of course, there's vitamin C and vitamin D that your immune system definitely depends upon. So now there's some investigational therapies that are going on that do not have FDA support. One is ERDRP. It's a polymerase inhibitor that prevents clinical disease and improves survival in non-human primates, monkeys. Polymerase is an enzyme that's necessary in vaccine theory for the growth of viral populations. It's kind of I'll get out in the weeds. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then there's monoclonal antibodies that targets the measles fusion protein to block viral entry into the cell. And these remain experimental, but represent a growing option of possibilities out there besides standard medical care. Now, this systematic review that I'm going through here is a part of the International Medical Alliance, their commitment to providing complete evidence-based treatment on measles, something that's been notably absent in the mainstream media. Mainstream media receives a large portion of its income from big pharma. And it's their job, the editors, the people who are reporting the news are reading a teleprompter. You know that. Even your favorite TV station, news, weather, sports, they're reading from a teleprompter that's right in front of them. Did they put that in there? In some cases, yes. But in most cases, it was the editor during the night collating the information that had flown in through the day, coupled with their advertisers, influenced by their advertisers, edited by their advertisers, that went into the teleprompter feed that the reporters will be giving to you the next morning. And if you have some favorite personalities, like I do, reporting the news, weather or sports, every now and then they report something, and when they're reading it, I mean, they're reading this stuff ahead of time. What they're going to report in the first hour of the presence of that program's broadcast, they've skimmed through it. They've read through it so they don't get a curveball. But every now and then they get a curveball, and you see them reporting something that either disturbs them, they don't believe in, or they find somewhat shocking, and you can see it in their eyes when they're talking about it. I watch for that kind of stuff because I think it's hilarious. Talk about being set up. But everything I just got through talking to you about in the last 30 minutes, well, 20 minutes, is notably absent from mainstream coverage. They're not going to talk about this stuff because the measles pharmaceutical industry doesn't want you to understand there is a way around it. And that's to build up the body's immune resistance. Vitamin A, vitamin C, and D, all very important in the body's ability to ward off disease. So one of the senior fellows of the International Medical Alliance, Dr. Elizabeth Mumper, a pediatrician with decades of experience, has been educating families on measles facts and treatment options and vaccine considerations through their Kids Corner series and media appearances. And this new peer-reviewed study that I'm going through adds a lot of published evidence to support what the IMA has been saying all along. Measles is manageable, and patients deserve the full picture. And who are the ones who suffer the most from a very serious measles infection? Those who are immunocompromised, children who are sick ahead of time, especially children on chemotherapy. So when you hear about the occasional child, even though there's hundreds of measles cases that show up, a lot of times in closed religious communities, why would something like measles spread like wildfire in a closed religious community? Closed isn't really the best word, but that's kind of what they talk about. Because they're around each other in large populations. And anything that spreads quickly, like measles will, is going to spread through a population very, very, very fast. But what they don't tell you is in these closed religious communities, none of the kids died. They went through a measles infection, and then we don't know whether it's the wild measles or the vaccine-created measles that didn't show up until after the vaccine showed up. And interestingly enough, antibodies for measles in a pregnant mother, I guess that's kind of redundant, a pregnant mother, in a woman who was pregnant, if she had measles as a child, wild measles, she has antibodies to prevent her from getting measles the rest of her life. Those antibodies will pass the placental barrier into the developing baby who will be born with her or his mother's measles antibodies that will last a year, sometimes longer. There's some studies that indicate it could last as much as 15 months after the birth of the baby. You kind of wonder, how do these babies survive when they come into a hostile, very unsterile world as soon as they leave that amniotic sac? Because they have an awful lot of mom's antibodies. Most of them will last a half a year or a little bit longer. The baby's body will not manufacture antibodies until they're 12 months old. Giving a child injections of vaccine chemicals to develop their immune system before the age of 12 is ridiculous. All you're doing is poisoning the body because it can't produce antibodies until around 12 months. Any book that goes into human physiology, especially that of the developing immune system of newborn infants, clearly says this. I've seen it in 2 major editions. And I still have, the latest one I use is Guyton's 11th edition. Very clearly it says it. Immune factors such as antibodies don't develop until around 12 months of age. Now, as of early this month, South Carolina still remains the center of the largest outbreak of measles in this country in, over 30 years. So far, as of just a few days ago, they have 920 confirmed cases, and over 90% reportedly occurring in unvaccinated individuals. See, that would be almost 800. 800 of the 920 are unvaccinated. And so the headlines are saying the vaccine refusal on the part of the parents is threatening the health of these children. But beneath the headlines, of course, as is always the case, lies a more complex picture. One that's shaped by data classification, eligibility confusion, methodological blind spots that public health authorities have failed to address. So, what is the public being told? The South Carolina, you can go read this for yourself. It's brand new information. The South Carolina Department of Public Health reports that among the 920 confirmed measles cases, 840 were unvaccinated. 20 of them had received 1 dose of the measles vaccine. 24 have received 2 doses of the measles vaccine, and 36 of the 920 unknown vaccination status. So roughly 90% of the cases occurred in children under 18. Of the 920 confirmed cases, 90% of them were in people under the age of 18, with over 240 of them in children under the age of 5. And the age data, isn't clear enough really to ascertain vaccine limitation in the very young, because it's hard to get that information. But the narrative from the Department of Health and echoed by national outlets is very clear. This vaccine preventable outbreak, driven by refusal and under vaccination. That's what the media is saying. Now, this kind of framing conceals more than it reveals, because the raw case counts are not the problem. What's missing is the structure that's needed to interpret them. Now, we've had a pretty good dose of measles outbreak in this country. We are, this state, Utah, I think the only state that has a higher rate of cases is South Carolina. Now, we're bordered by Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. Arizona has several cases, but Nevada, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico have very, very little at all. Now, what are the problems with the way this is being reported? Well, unvaccinated individuals includes the ineligible. Of the 90% that are unvaccinated, there are those who are ineligible for vaccination. But the term unvaccinated is used indiscriminately in public health summaries to scare people, but it shouldn't be, because infants under the age of 12 are not eligible for routine MMR vaccination. Children aged 6 to 11 months in the outbreak region were given very early doses during the outbreak, which do not count toward the standard 2-dose schedule and are very inconsistently recorded. So what does that mean? Well, without separating it into smaller groups, infants under the age of 6 months are not eligible for any dose, even though some of them were getting it because the parents were scared. Infants 6 to 11 months may have received early doses, but it wasn't credited to the series because it wasn't coupled with the 2-dose schedule, in spite of no expectation of seroconversion, meaning the antibodies showing up in the bloodstream. Children 12 to 15 months are due for the routine dose of 1 shot to begin with. So the label unvaccinated conflates ineligibility with refusal, and it erases any possibility of accurate attribution. Do you understand what I just said? When they say unvaccinated, it's mixing up. When they label these people unvaccinated, it conflates the ineligibility with refusal, because they're not discriminating between the two that actually said, no, not in my child, as a refusal, as to those that are included in this group that were ineligible for the vaccine, even though they got measles. Now, the Department of Health currently collapses all these ages into a new, well, not a new bin, but a bin called 0 to 4 years old, which fuses distinct immunological categories into one big misleading cohort. Then number 2, the problem, no denominators, which means no meaningful vaccine effectiveness estimate. In other words, you cannot compute vaccine effectiveness from percent vaccinated among the cases. In other words, vaccine effectiveness has known denominators. How many vaccinated and unvaccinated were at risk or exposed or susceptible during the outbreak? So when you don't have these markers that are stratified by age and vaccine status, especially for Spartanburg County, which accounts for 95% of the cases, even the most basic estimates of attack rate are impossible. What does that mean? Well, even if only 2.6% of measles cases occurred in fully vaccinated individuals, if the vaccinated population was larger and more exposed, that percentage could represent significant vaccine failure. So conversely, it could indicate strong protection. But without denominators, it's all speculation. And then problem number 3 that I kind of alluded to earlier, misclassification of vaccine strain illness to the wild type measles. Now, the CDC acknowledges that 5 to 7% of individuals vaccinated with the live attenuated measles virus develop a rash and fever post-vaccination. These are not contagious, but they meet the clinical case for definition of measles if genotype testing is not performed. What is genotype testing? Well, they're looking at the genetic structure of the virus. Is it wild, or is it the live attenuated virus in the vaccine? And if you don't do genotype testing to distinguish between the two, how do you know what where the measles came from, because the CDC acknowledges that as high as 7% of individuals vaccinated with the live attenuated virus are going to develop measles symptoms. So last month in January, over 1,200 infants aged 6 to 11 months were vaccinated in the outbreak region. If any developed rash within 21 days and were not tested using genotype S assays, they may have been misclassified as a measles case rather than something else that has a skin rash that shows up. And to date, the Department of Health in the state of South Carolina has published no data on how many cases were tested for genotype. Of the 920, there is no data trying to determine if they were vaccine measles or wild measles. And so without the actual number of vaccine breakthrough wild type cases, it may be much smaller than reported. Then problem 4, confirmation method, is not disclosed. There's no published breakdown of how each case was confirmed. How did they determine in the 920 cases they had measles? Well, they haven't said. Were they PCR confirmed? Were they immunoglobulin M confirmed serologically through blood examination? Were they just clinically diagnosed, symptoms only? Oh, that looks like a measles rash. That's measles. A lot of the measles outbreaks in high vaccination settings rely heavy on epidemiological linkage. In other words, how were they exposed? Who were they exposed to? The people that they were exposed to, how were they exposed? And so they were at a church get together, a party, a church weekend party. And we think, or it seems to be the case, there were 2 or 3 children who had measles that attended this party. And out of the party, 18 of the kids that were present all came down with measles. Was there a serological test done to prove by blood examination it was actually measles? No. Or if there was, it was not reported. And you would think that they would report that, because in the absence of transparency, the reliability of the full 920 case remains in question. Then there was no cross-tabulation of vaccine and severity. In other words, the Department of Health reported a 2% hospitalization rate. Of the 920, 2% had to go to the hospital, which is a strikingly low figure compared to historic measles outbreaks, which often will involve anywhere from 15 to 25% hospitalization due to complications like pneumonia and encephalitis. But in the latest information as of last week, the Department of Public Health has released no breakdown of hospitalizations by vaccine status or age group. Were vaccinated individuals hospitalized? Were the hospitalized infants too young for vaccination? Was there a clustering of a bunch of unknowns? We don't know, because they're not reported. You can't access whether the vaccine reduced severity or whether different groups had different clinical risks, because this missing data is critical. And then something that I referred to earlier is that maternal immunity has shifted. In past generations, infants born to mothers who had natural measles infections inherited those maternal antibodies. As I said, they could last anywhere from 12 to 15 months. Today, most of the mothers of these 920 children have been vaccinated. They weren't infected. They were vaccinated as young girls. And the antibody titers that passed to the infants wane far earlier than the 12 to 15 months of wild measles. So this leaves infants vulnerable during the very first year of life before they're even eligible for their first MMR shot. So what? Well, the outbreak reflects the shift with a disproportionate burden on infants who would historically have been protected passively. And so blaming parents for failure to vaccinate their babies under age one ignores the whole concept of measles immunity caused by vaccine-driven elimination of natural infection. What does that mean? That means when you have a growing population of mothers who have been vaccinated for some childhood disease when they were children, they still possess some of those titers to some degree, but not very strongly. And they will pass that on to the child. And so the child begins to be susceptible to either wild or attenuated viruses much earlier in life than a child who got and received from their mother strong immunological protection from wild measles. And now, the Department of Public Health will not or has not released a case line list of minimal scientific data set that should include age and months. Now, I want you to get this. I want you to sit on this. Of the 920 cases, they have not made a public display of the age and months of the sick, the county of residence, the rash onset date, the way the diagnosis was confirmed, the vaccination status and dose rates, other than a generalized application, hospitalization status, or genotype between attenuated virus and wild virus. So without this, the public and the scientific community cannot audit the basis of the outbreak size, the outbreak severity, or true vaccine linkage. And claims that are made without this accessible data, because it's there in the Department of Health, is certainly not science. It's just assertions. And the way that surveillance of the outbreak of measles in South Carolina is established is not designed to test the vaccine. What do I mean? When you have an outbreak of anything like this, surveillance is built in to detect the outbreak. How many people per thousand or whatever are through case analysis, not serological analysis, not proving sickness through blood testing, but just they look like a measles case, are not designed to evaluate the effectiveness of the vaccine, only to count those that look like they have measles. So when you have case-based surveillance, not serological-based surveillance, case-based surveillance, these cases, not population at risk, not exposure time, not dose response over time, they just look like measles. Yet the Department of Health and the CDC messaging routinely equates a few vaccinated among these cases, the proof that the vaccine works. Utter nonsense. It's like the beginning of COVID, when they had infectious case mortality, where up until about April of 2020, the cases that were showing up of COVID, remember there were very, very few to start with, were confirmed through blood testing. And as usually the case, long about latter March, early April, when the cold and flu season is coming to an end, because the sun is higher in the sky, you have more vitamin D, therefore you have more calcium absorption, therefore you have a stronger immune system, which brings to end the cold and flu season. They switched from serological testing to case identity. It looks like COVID. Then the numbers exploded the second week in April of 2020. Almost everybody and their dog had COVID then because they had a runny nose, a fever, sore throat, and flu-like symptoms. Now, what's all this got to do with what I just said? In April of 2020, they were setting the stage to sell the public on a vaccine. Here, in measles cases, we've already got vaccines. Got two basic, there's several, but there's two basic ones. One that has dead virus, and of course the virus is dead anyway, or the other one that has live attenuated virus, which may not be the virus at all, it may just be exosomes, because exosomes look just like a virus under electron microscopy. But what happens when you go from serological testing, blood testing, to case testing, case diagnosis? My goodness, it looks like measles. No, but look at this. Look at these pictures. Go Google it. Good gracious, my son has measles because I went on Google Images and his skin looks exactly like the images on Google. And that's how a lot of these cases were diagnosed. Well, you think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is when you don't have good markers as to who was vaccinated, at what age, what kind of vaccine, and whether there was one, two, or something that was done too early, and you call them vaccinated or unvaccinated, and they're a rather small proportion of the entire group with the idea that the vaccination is what has kept those numbers low. In other words, the vaccinated population is much lower than the unvaccinated population. But when you have terrible markers trying to decide what's what, you use that as proof that the vaccine works. And it leads the public to false confidence with outcomes improve when they improve, or false blame when they don't. In other words, it's very easy to say the kids that got vaccinated didn't get measles. The kids that didn't get vaccinated got the measles, when there's no true delineation between them. Then there's a problem with lot number. Oh my goodness, the first hour is almost over. And the cold chain audits. What's that? If the 24 fully vaccinated cases are true breakthrough infections, a real scientific investigation would ask, were those doses clustered in time or location? Were they from the same vaccine lot? Were there cold chain issues or administration errors? Cold chain means we can't track the lot. So the DPH has published no such audit. They have the vaccination records. They have the batch numbers. It's all listed in state immunization registries. So if these breakthrough cases represent systemic failures, the problem is logistical, not immunological. In other words, the reporting of all those numbers is based on poor record keeping, rather than who was or wasn't truly sick and with what strain. And that information is completely traceable, but they don't do it. Or if they have, they haven't admitted it. So, to move from press release theater designed to scare parents into getting their kids vaccinated to actual outbreak science, the DPH has to publish the following: a de-identified case level data set, age, county, onset, confirmation, vaccine history, and outcome. They haven't published that. Genotype testing to distinguish vaccine strain measles from the wild type. Of the 920 so-called confirmed cases, how many of them were wild virus? How many of them were vaccine strain illnesses? Hospitalization data stratified by age and vaccination status. Those that ended up in the hospital. What were their ages? What was their vaccination status that got in the hospital? And then population denominators for each affected county by age and vaccine status. And then, of course, the lot number and the cold chain data for all breakthrough cases. These aren't unreasonable demands. They're standard practice for evaluating public health claims. So the South Carolina measles outbreak, it may be very real. I have no doubt of that. But parts of its reported size and severity may well be inflated by classification errors and denominator omission. And the MMR vaccine may still be effective, but if so, you've got to demonstrate that through properly structured, auditable data. And they don't do that. They don't publish that information. So there's no way to confirm whether the measles vaccine actually works. And to just say of the 920 confirmed cases, 20 of them were vaccinated is no proof the vaccination works. And so until that data is published, the story of the outbreak remains incomplete. And those of us who are concerned with stuff like this, we're not done asking questions. Not by a long shot. All right, now, I am concerned with this next pandemic that is already in operation. What time is it? It's 8 o'clock. I want to spend some time on the heart, but I want to spend some time on this Nipah virus. I'm sure you've heard about it. The same architects of the last pandemic are busy at work priming the world for the next one. And the inevitable consequence of a world, no, let me rephrase that. How are they getting away with it the second time? Because they weren't public. They weren't punished the first time. They're still out there running around. So you heard these recent reports of this recent study identifying 3,625 biosafety level 3 and level 4 laboratories worldwide. The majority of them are here in this country, incidentally. But you've heard about this, I'm sure, if you're watching the news or you study this kind of stuff. The global expansion of high containment biolabs without oversight that are increasingly engaged in Nipah, NIPAH. I think that's how you pronounce it. Virus research combined with this amazing aggressive patent consolidation of the core glycoproteins, and as we learned from COVID, their integration into mRNA and the self-amplifying mRNA injectables really represents a profound and escalating global biosecurity risk. And that's why I'm calling this the next pandemic, because it's already underway. What are we doing with 3,625 biosafety level 3 and level 4 laboratories? 73% of them do not publicly disclose their locations or what pathogens they're studying. That's 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 of these 3,625 labs do not publicly disclose their locations or their pathogen activities. 91% of countries operating biosafety level 3 labs lack dual-use research oversight. Roughly half of these factories and facilities are located in the United States. And more than 300 documented lab leaks have occurred since 2001. So, this study that found 3,625 high containment biolabs worldwide. As I said, 73% do not disclose their locations or pathogen activities. The Nipah virus is a biosafety lab 4 pathogen with case fatality rates ranging from 40 to 75% in the documented outbreaks. Where have the outbreaks of the Nipah virus occurred in the greatest numbers? And before you say Africa, don't say Africa because you'd be wrong. Bangladesh and India. But these are case fatality rates. Again, you want to keep the demarcations that I was talking about with measles that's missing from the South Carolina Department of Health's published numbers. You have to keep in mind the difference between infectious fatality rate and case fatality rate. Infectious fatality rate is somebody who died and it was confirmed through blood tests that they were in fact killed by that particular virus, as opposed to a case fatality rate where it looks like they died from that virus. And so those fatality rates in Bangladesh and India, those apparently dying from the Nipah virus, because it looks like the Nipah virus, were as much as 40 to 75% death rate in those two countries. Way, way beyond COVID. Nipah virus outbreaks have occurred almost every year since the late 1990s. As I said, primarily in Bangladesh and in India. India is now reporting that it has contained the Nipah virus, as some Asian countries are just ramping up health screenings like crazy. Remember what happened with China when COVID showed up. However, accelerating Nipah virus laboratory activities and patents, the rush for the patents to make the billions they're going to be making off the Nipah vaccine and the mRNA injection work concerns me. Does it concern you? Because given the biopharmaceutical complex's business model of engineering pathogens while profiteering from their countermeasures. Let's see how fast we can build a new, rapidly dispersing, infectious, viral-based disease. We can patent the glycoproteins that are inside that little bugger and then release the vaccine, supposedly to prevent the infection of that little glycoprotein mix. What a business model. You create a disease so that you can create a vaccine, so you can create billions. Uh, Is there a better business model than that? We continue to make engines for our automobiles based on hydrocarbon fuels. So as long as we continue to do that, we're going to continue to refine oil to produce the gasoline for these engines. When we start producing the engines that run on water or hydrogen gas, it'll be a little bit different. But strangely, just last week, it was reported that China is preparing a Nipah virus test kit nationwide, and that the Wuhan Institute of Virology announced it had identified a potential drug that could treat Nipah. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And it appears that the infamous Wuhan lab is currently handling the Nipah virus. That should just make you feel really safe and secure. Now, according to Dr. Stephen Quay's June 18, 2024 testimony before the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, the raw sequencing data deposited by the Wuhan Institute of Virology in December of 2019 contained evidence of work involving the Nipah virus infectious clone, specifically of the highly pathogenic Bangladesh strain. That's kind of interesting. This Dr. Quay stated that the sequencing shows that the molecular features consistent with this infectious format, including ribosome and terminator elements typical of synthetic virology constructs. What does that mean? It means they made the Nipah virus. He further testified that the research involving Nipah infectious clones have never been publicly reported at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, raising some rather serious questions about undisclosed synthetic biology work, which is what Wuhan does. This is 2019. That's 7 years ago. And equally troubling is this documented March 2009 shipment from Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory to Wuhan that included 2 strains of Nipah virus, the Malaysia one and the Bangladesh one, along with samples of Ebola and Hendra viruses. Now, why would Canada be shipping that to Wuhan? Why did the North Carolina University send what they were developing with COVID to Wuhan? Because you can develop these things in China. You can't do that here. Obama was really playing with the law when he sponsored a lot of the COVID research at the University of North Carolina. And once they realized, hey, we can go to jail for this, they shipped it out of the country to Wuhan. Canada, in March of 2019, did the same thing. 2 strains of Nipah that they were developing in Canada, the Malaysia brand and the Bangladesh brand, along with Ebola and Hendra viruses. What kind of a world is this? And they aren't studying. They aren't studying how to prevent this stuff, or they'd be talking about nutrition. They're studying how to make these things as deadly as possible, and at the same time, a vaccine to prevent it. Like I said earlier, what a business model. How far do I want to go with this? At the same time that was going on, the World Health Organization had repeatedly listed Nipah among the priority pathogens with pandemic potential under the Research and Development Blueprint. Anipavirus nipahensa, which is the Nipah virus. This is a report from Research and Development out of the World Health Organization. Is considered a priority pathogen for the acceleration of medical countermeasures to respond to epidemics and pandemics as part of the World Health Organization Research and Development Blueprint for epidemics. So now they have categorized Nipah under this Disease X preparedness strategy. Remember a year ago, 2 years ago, they were talking about the coming Disease X. They weren't sure what to call it. And Marburg and Zika and a few other things that they started to try to identify as the next Disease X. Well, it looks like it might be this Nipah, because they are pouring millions of dollars into Nipah mRNA injection development. Why would they do that? Before there was any real generalized outbreak of this virus, except in isolated areas. And I don't know how isolated certain pockets of India is, or Bangladesh, or Malaysia. But when you want to test this stuff on the public, you kind of want to do it in controlled circumstances. Why? Because you don't want it getting out that you don't have a vaccine for it yet. But you want to test how virulent and deadly this stuff is. So you test it on isolated populations in certain countries where the level of medical investigation may be controlled to the point where it doesn't happen. Did I really say that? Now, Albert Bourla, Moderna, Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, Peter Hotez, Peter Marks, Ashish Jha, Tedros Ghebreyesus, they're all declaring with absolute certainty that another pandemic is imminent. And you probably have heard the little clips from Bill Gates. I remember back in October of 2023, I think it was, reporting on my health show that there was a large meeting that took place in Manhattan where they were laying out the constructs and the directives for the next pandemic. So the convergence of all of this stuff is getting quite, quite concerning. Because the patents consolidating control over the Nipah virus is becoming more and more apparent because patent application is public information. And what are they doing? They're patenting the surface proteins across multiple vaccine and the genetic delivery systems they're coming up with. That should put a little chill in your spine. The work that's positioning the Nipah virus proteins for use in the mRNA and self-amplifying injections is growing. Remember, they were talking a little bit about this towards the end of the COVID vaccinations, the self-amplifying ones. So you didn't have to bother going in for additional boosters. You could get the one that was boosting itself. Then you look at the shipment of the Nipah virus to Wuhan in 2019 from here, from Canada. And then the Senate testimony alleging synthetic Nipah infectious clone work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The WHO classification of Nipah as a pandemic priority pathogen. The positioning of Nipah within its Disease X rapid response vaccine framework. The escalation of mass media Nipah virus fear-mongering is starting to show up. These secretive laboratory locations, over 3,600, and the undisclosed pathogen experimentation that they're doing, and the minimal oversight across most of the world's high containment biolabs. And then the pandemic and the vaccine profiteers claiming with 100% certainty that another pandemic is imminent. How much more? How many more red flags do you need that this is going to be the next pandemic? And they're talking about some of the more contagious aspects, contagious genotypes can be 75% mortality. Fauci was talking about that with COVID. He was predicting 200,000 deaths in the first month or something like that from COVID. Why didn't any of these people get prosecuted? Why does the Department of Justice get all excited about Epstein and these unbelievably evil, satanic behaviors on some of these super rich elites and what they have done with children in these COVID or these Epstein papers, while this thing is slipping in behind the back door? Well, there has to be urgent federal investigation into pandemic and vaccine profiteering. There has to be an immediate global moratorium on gain of function research. Gain of function. In other words, to make the function more profitable in the sense of becoming more deadly. Why would you do this to a virus? Because you're trying to make it deadly. Why would you want it deadly? So you can kill enough people that you can scare enough people to buy your vaccines. As though the vaccines would work. Oh yeah, they're safe and effective. Don't worry about that. And there has to be wholesale, without excluding any of these modified pathogens, they must be destroyed in fire within the thousands of the Biosafety Lab 3 and Biosafety Lab 4 laboratories worldwide. Who's going to do that? When the public health officials who oversee this stuff have been bought and sold 10 times over. And so this stuff is going on behind the scenes because everybody's attention is diverted to this poor woman who got kidnapped, this previous elected official. And now there was all this hubbub about the suspected kidnapper, and the person was released because apparently he's not a person of interest anymore, occupying the news. But you're not going to hear this stuff that I've just been talking about. I can't emphasize enough the absolute need to make sure you've got a strong, resilient immune system. Because this stuff is definitely coming to a planet near you. And as a result, it is definitely going to show up on your doorstep. So I was talking about about the measles, the necessity of vitamin A supplementation see, vitamin A is only comes from animal products, like vitamin D. only comes from animal products. The plant kingdom does not produce vitamin A. It does not produce vitamin D. It produces vitamin E. It produces vitamin C, but not A and D. And so that, it has to come in through your diet. Some companies claim that they have a vitamin A, a plant-derived vitamin A. It doesn't exist. All right. Now I want to get into what we have coming up this weekend, Valentine's Day. So as much as I've disturbed your thinking and your comfort levels this morning, talking about the Nipah pandemic that's on its way, don't forget your Valentine. Don't forget your Valentine. Now, if your Valentine is suffering from sciatica, migraines, headaches, we do a great job with that. The half-off special is still going for new patients. Half off the total fees. That's a savings of several $100s. I know times are tough. But if you want what I do, you've got to come to me. I just got back from Phoenix for teaching what I do for 4 days to almost 30 doctors trying to become board certified in this work. And only board certified doctors are allowed to teach it. I was one of 4. I taught a lot of neurology, and I taught a lot of psychology, as well as the practical application of the work that I do. And I just had a great time doing that. I could see myself retiring from practice and spending full-time teaching to people who want to learn how to do this, because this is very, very powerful work. If you would like to sit down and talk to me about your symptoms so we can determine whether it's in my ballpark, if I could help you or not, you would call 801-523-1890 to schedule an appointment, 801-523-1890, or you can go online, jackstockwell.com, and schedule yourself, and then the staff will get back to you to confirm that. And then this coming weekend, Valentine's Day, the Valentine's Day sale will start Friday night, midnight, and go till Monday night, midnight. All right, so I want to talk about, because it's Valentine's Day, I would like to talk a little bit. How much time do we have left? Oh, we got a half an hour. I want to talk a little bit about the heart. A month or two ago, almost every single week, I was talking about the heart. And the reason why is because no organ in the body will respond to improved nutrition faster than the heart does. Just as no organ in the body suffers faster from malnutrition than the heart does, which is simply the leading cause of heart disease in our country, is malnutrition. Eating too much of what you probably shouldn't be eating, not eating enough of what you should be eating. And so the heart suffers as a result. When you look at the amount of energy that heart is consuming, beat to beat to beat to beat, constantly ongoing, it has to be fed. And it has to be fed cardiac fuel. And when it isn't, it's going to suffer. And today, it's very easy to become a heart statistic. I can't think of any one day passing by that we aren't consulting with somebody about their heart. We did another heart sound recorder yesterday on a lady in her 80s. And I think her last test was a couple of years ago. and she wanted to be checked again. So she came in, we checked her. She's been using the supplements I told her to use for the last 2 years, and the heart sound recorder showed marked improvement in the function of the 4 valves. Now, the hard part is seeing through the veil of secrecy and self-importance in organized medicine to get to the truth about what the heart requires. Now, to keep yourself healthy and indeed to keep yourself alive, you have to identify and see through this veil that is presented by the American Heart Association, the American Cardiology Association, and anything else that is promoting drugs for anything to do with the heart and drugs for everything to do with the heart. Jack, I'm alive because they saved my life in the emergency room, and I'm going to be on these drugs the rest of my life. That may be true. I don't argue that. I'm not arguing what you're doing after your life was saved from a major heart attack. I'm arguing about what led up to it. And will improved nutrition help the heart after they saved your life? Absolutely it will. And will greatly decrease your need for the drugs, simply by feeding the heart so the heart gets back to working like it was when you were 8 years old. Oh, is such a thing possible? Of course it's possible. And one of the nicest people I ever met came up to me the other day in the office and said he thinks he's suffering from heart problems. One of the most profound mentors I ever had in the work that I do died a year ago, last November 18th. 6 years younger than me. But when I worked on him, the last time, just a few days before he passed away, he said, "Jack, I think I had a heart attack last night." And I said, "Well, for Pete's sake, let's go do something about it." No, I'm sure I'm okay. How can you be okay if you thought you had a heart attack last night? Well, I really think I'm okay because I feel really good. Yeah, this bounce. And that was Sunday afternoon. Tuesday, he fell and died in the driveway of his home down in Arizona. 2 days later, or maybe 3 days later, whatever, from a massive heart attack he did not recover from. Then in discussions I had with his wife after this, she said there were plenty of warnings. This wasn't the first time. There were plenty of warnings where his heart would stop beating, he would stop breathing. She'd call the EMS, they'd show up, and just in time to start his heart and get him breathing again. Did he go into the hospital for full evaluation? No, because he's okay. The stubbornness of this fellow. Someone who was just a very, very good friend. He's not around anymore. And I told him several times, "You've got to come to Salt Lake and let me do this heart test on you." If there's somebody that you love, and obviously there is, that's what this heart sound recorder test is for. Does it take the place of an EKG? No, because it doesn't do what an EKG does. An EKG is looking at the electrical signals coming out of the heart. What this test is doing is listening to the sound the heart makes and interpreting that sound. Listening to the sound of the myocardium contracting, the muscles, the heart muscle contract, but also the opening and closing of the valves. Is there leakage? Is there stenosis? Is there regurgitation? Is there evidence of prolapse? Even today, 2026, it's well understood and established that auscultation, heart sounds, listening to the heart, either through a stethoscope or a microphone or something else placed over the valves of the heart, is still the absolute best way to evaluate heart health. Because an EKG doesn't always show weakness of the myocardial contraction. It doesn't always show sluggishness in the opening or closing of valves. It does a good job of showing AFib. There's no issue about that. It does a good job of showing long QT. It does a good job of that. But it doesn't show the overall function of the valves working together in a cohesive fashion as one marvelous pump. That's what this test does. This device has been around for decades. But the medical world kind of shuns it. The medical world shuns it because they got the EKG. Why do they need something else? Why would they need something else that will show things about the heart the EKG won't show? Well, it's because they'd have to expand their horizon and look at something a little deeper. So this friend of mine, that I'm talking about, passed away just, kind of fell for the high-tech world of organized medicine, but not seriously enough to do something about it. So post-mortem, they said that every vessel in his heart was plugged. He was thin. Actually, he may have been a little underweight. Active golfer, active hiker, active biker. Had all of the earmarks of being a very healthy person. And then with any kind of even minor diagnostic investigation prior to his death, nothing showed up except we need to do some real serious testing. Well, if he had allowed serious testing to take place, they probably would have done at least a triple or at least a triple bypass. And I don't know. He's a man. And men are like this. Men are immortal. I've had that problem somewhat in my life as well, where I have a tendency to ignore little things that show up from time to time until they become big little things. Then you finally got to do something about it. So what am I doing? I'm currently feeding my brain, my liver, my thyroid, my kidneys, my prostate. What else? My gallbladder with nutrition to keep those things working. I don't always eat as I should. I don't exercise like I should. So I consider this stuff to be insurance that I do to keep things working. So I want to talk to you about the basics. And while nutritional complexes always seem to work the best with heart disease problems, these kinds of nutritional complexes are the only products I find that really get the job done, as is evidenced in pre and post heart scan recordings. And when it comes to cardiovascular disease, these basics are just absolutely indispensable and have to be used by, well, all patients if they're actually planning to get better. I mean, these products are produced from whole, raw, organic foods and glands and plants, and which are extremely rich in nutrients. And I choose to use standard process, which is the benchmark. It's the high water mark of excellence in the production of these kinds of products, the one that everybody else tries to copy. And their original formations were put together almost a century now. First product came out in 1929. That's just 3 years. So what do I take? I take something called Cardio Plus. I just had it this morning. It's a product of just a supreme product for people with cardiac fatigue, for high blood pressure, for heart muscle weakness, for heart muscle atrophy, for angina, for congestive heart failure, for heart arrhythmias, heart spasms, heart valve problems, clogged arteries. I mean, and anybody who had a heart attack. Does it cure anything? No, it doesn't cure anything at all. Any more than a carrot will cure blindness. But a carrot will provide you, an organic carrot will provide you with organic beta carotene. And if you have a healthy gut, then your body will convert that beta carotene into vitamin A. These kinds of foods I'm recommending for the heart, Cardio Plus, contains the very kinds of extracts like high selenium yeast, whole vitamin E, whole vitamin F, synergists from beef chromatin, beet extract, beetroot, raw sprouted grain and germ, heart extract, phospholipids, raw bone, buckwheat, alfalfa, mushrooms, liver, rice, bran, allantoin, tillandsia, adrenal extract, among a bunch of other stuff. So when I tell people, they ask me, what vitamin should I get? Well, read the label. If they list a bunch of chemical names, it's synthetic and it's going to hurt you. That stuff should be banned. It's not fit for human consumption. If they have a whole bunch of foods listed, on the other hand, which is where Mother Nature intended our nutrition to come from her, from the earth, not from laboratories. Then you got something else. I recommend Cataplex B Core. I took 4 of those this morning for most heart patients. It's for people with arrhythmias, people for congestive heart failure, for murmurs, for fibrillation, for tachycardia, for bradycardia, too fast, too slow, low blood pressure, weak heart, poor heart muscle tone, edema, fatigue, mental and emotional problems like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, for problems with neuropathies, neuritis, neuralgia, high blood fats, clogged arteries, postpartum depression, concentration and memory problems, and those with a constant fear of impending doom. Do you know anybody like that? That's a serious sign of vitamin D deficiencies. The fear of impending doom. They've known that for decades. A symptom of vitamin B deficiency. Fear of impending doom. Its main ingredients are liver, yeast, wheat germ, beet. Now this is on the label. It doesn't say thiamine monochloride or the B1, B2, B3 things with chemical names. It says liver, yeast, wheat germ, beet juice, adrenal extract, carrot, all organic, all processed without heat of any kind. It contains the whole vitamin B complex, including B4, which is the missing ingredient in every other nutritional heart product. B4 has also been called the anti-paralysis factor. It's often a single critical factor in helping heart patients recover when all the other nutrients fail. B-Core was first made back in the early 1930s, and it's essential to almost all heart patients. Am I a heart patient? Well, prophylactically, sure. My father lived to be 96. My mother died during heart surgery when she was 80. She would have been 81 that year she passed away. And she had a prolapsed mitral valve, and it was just terrible. I mean, it wasn't not getting the job done at all. Her left ventricle was hardly pumping any good blood to the system, so she couldn't walk across the room without heart cramps, without angina. So she consulted with me about getting the surgery. And I said, because she had a very good friend in the assisted living place where she was living, who had mitral valve replacement and was doing great. She could go out and walk around the block. And I told her I had some concerns about it, but if that's what she really felt that she needed to do, I would certainly support her. Well, she died during surgery. But she was a smoker from probably her teens. She was born in 1920. So what would she, if she was still alive, she'd be 26 this year, 126. My goodness, it's been a long time since she passed, 25 years ago. Anyway, she started smoking in her teens. This is before World War II. Women smoking back then kind of got a bad look, but she was a smoker. She smoked right on till about 1976, 77, somewhere. So the last 30 years of her life, she was not a smoker. But her diet was her biggest problem. She ate too many processed foods, not enough Mother Nature foods. And so, like 95% of the rest of her population group, she had ongoing cardiovascular, congestive problems until it finally got her, which is what gets the majority of us. Number one killer in America. At the time that she was having this valve replacement issue, I was just getting into standard process. If I knew about standard process back then that I know now, I would say, no, Mom, no. Let's give this another 30, 60 days. Here's the protocol that I want to put you on. The Cardio Plus that I'm talking about, the Cataplex B Core, and something called Cardiotrophin. So these three things will turn your heart around. But it's going to take 60 to 90 days, but we can rebuild a much stronger portion of your heart than what you're suffering from now. But I didn't know that then. And there was no way I could argue her desire to get valve replacement, because obviously she couldn't go on the way she was. She couldn't get up and walk around the room without a heart pain. Then there's Cyruta Plus. And there's Cataplex E2. And there's organically bound minerals. All these things designed to feed a weakening heart. So, I mean, it's remarkable how a physician will scold a patient for taking nutrients like this, because it might interfere with their medications. That's the standard comment by the medical people. When my patients who are on heart medication, and when they start these supplements, they want to know if they can stop their heart medication. I said, no, 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 no. Don't you dare stop that stuff. You continue to take it until your heart doctor tells you you don't need to. Well, my doctor says I'm going to be on it for the rest of my life. And I said, yeah, I understand them saying that because they don't understand nutrition. They don't understand how food works in the human body. And then I kind of get a surprised look. I said, no, I'm serious. They don't understand the nutritive benefit of whole organic foods on human physiology. They don't study isolated populations on this planet that spend most of the day gathering what they're going to eat from Mother Earth that night or that morning or whatever, that's coming directly from Mother Nature, not through some grocery store. And these people don't have heart disease. These people don't have cancer. These people don't have diabetes. These people are not obese. These people have strong dental arches. These people are sexually active in their 80s because their bodies are resiliently healthy. I've mentioned that to some patients before, how sexual activity is an indication of health. It's part of our natural physiology. Just because a woman goes into menopause doesn't mean sex is over. Thank goodness her estrogen levels drop so that she doesn't ovulate anymore. But sex is a very strong indicator of overall physiological strength. It's one of the manifestations of human existence. And when sex goes out the window, I bet you've got a weak heart. When ED shows up, I bet you got a weak heart. When you become a couch potato, when you were physically active before that, you've got a weak heart. And that heart's going to get weaker unless we do something to feed it. And it's not just drugs. And when my heart patients tell me that their heart doctor doesn't want them taking these supplements because it'll interfere with their medication, I just break out laughing. I said, did you bother to tell them what's in these supplements? And I don't completely blame the ignorant medical doctor, because most of what these medical people know about nutrition is because of synthetic nutritional products that are made in the laboratory, not from Mother Nature. So when you see research that comes out that says vitamin C will cause hardening of the arteries, vitamin E will cause problems with the heart, vitamin A can cause birth defects. These are all true because what they were testing in these studies was the synthetic version of the vitamin. There's this great study out of the University of Southern California, showed 250 milligrams of ascorbic acid a day will cause hardening of the arteries. And so a patient says, well, do you ever suggest vitamin C, ascorbic acid? Because vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is a part of the whole food vitamin C complex. But the FDA says vitamin C is ascorbic acid. Do you ever recommend that? Yeah, if you got a really bad cold or flu symptoms, sure. Take 3 or 4 grams of vitamin C a day for a few days. That acidification of your blood that ascorbic acid is going to provide will kill off most of what's bothering you, and you'll recover from the cold or flu much, much quicker. But don't stay on that dosage because it's extremely irritating to blood vessels and will cause them to harden. And the vitamin E that causes heart problems is the tocopherol oil. And just like ascorbic acid is to vitamin C, tocopherol oils are to vitamin E complex. The tocopherol oil is not vitamin E, even though the FDA says it is. It's the antioxidant portion of the whole food, vitamin E, that comes from the oil of the germ of grains. But when you load the body with the antioxidant portion, and the antioxidant portion isn't in there for you, the antioxidant portion is there to protect the food source from oxidation until you eat it. You know, the ultimate antioxidant is the skin of a banana, the skin of an apple, the skin of a pear, the skin of an orange, protecting the vital fruit inside from oxidation. Which is part of the fraud of antioxidants. But I've got a podcast at ForbiddenDoctor.com on that. And so the truth is that the drugs may interfere with the real healing produced by proper nutrition. It's the other way around from what the medical doctor says. You can't take these supplements, it'll interfere with your drugs. The truth is the drugs will interfere with your body's ability to assess and assimilate the natural foods that Mother Nature made. And the second great truth about this is that no one really knows what's going on with all these multiple drug interactions. I know somebody with a recent heart attack. I think they're on at least 4, maybe 5. It's a patient that we have. I think 5 different heart drugs. What's the interaction of all these drugs together doing to that person? But Dr. Jack, I'm alive because of these drugs. Yeah, you probably are. And thank goodness, the miracle of trauma care for the heart, the miracle of the current state of intercessory medicine when you're dying is to the stage it is now, that your life can be prolonged. But what are you going to do now? Are you going to change the road you're on that led you to this, dependent upon these drugs? Or do you want to change the road you're on and rebuild that heart so you don't need the drugs? Well, my doctor says I'm going to need this for the rest of my life. Well, then what are you doing in my office? What are you doing with my time? I'm not telling you not to take them. I'm telling you we got to rebuild that heart. And those drugs are not going to rebuild your heart. They just keep a dying heart beating until it's done. But I've got this pacemaker. Yeah, I know. Good. Thank goodness for pacemakers. There are people who are alive because of pacemakers. But that's not the end of all things. It's just the propaganda that I have to deal with from time to time. But no matter what your doctor or your pharmacist tells you, the biomechanical interactions and the side effects of putting all these drugs together in the body at the same time cannot be charted, cannot be mapped out. There's too many variables, too many different possibilities. And when the side effects show up, what do? Well, we're going to stop this one and start this one, because that's their only option. Whack-a-mole. Dr. Jack, I think you're too hard on this. I think you're too hard on these medical people. Hey, if I have a heart attack, I want to be in the best medical care I can possibly be in. That's not what I'm saying. If I have a serious car accident on the way to work this morning, I want to be in the best emergency room I can be in. I have no problem with emergency trauma care. Thank goodness it's at the state that it is today. It's what happens after the immediate trauma care that determines lifespan thereafter. I hope this helps. I hope this registers with some of you. What time is it? Well, we're done. All right. If by any chance, Paul, you're still listening, you can stop the recording because I can't get into it from this end. For some reason, the recorder isn't letting me in. Tomorrow and Friday, Paul will be on during this period of time. Encourage you to listen to Paul's show, obviously. And to all of the shows that are keeping you up to date here at K-Talk as to what's going on in the legislature. Some pretty hot stuff is going on. And I love the work that Gail is doing with her people up there at the building, at the Capitol. I mean, who else is doing that? Who else is doing this to the degree that we are at K-Talk? So once again, I greatly appreciate being able to be a part of this team. I am going to have to stop my show. And those of you on the stream, I'm going to end that now. Thank you so much for being a part of this. If you can like and subscribe, if you can share to increase our numbers, I've got to get to 1,000. I think we can do that this year. We're almost to 900 of subscribers. And 1,000 is the big number. All right. I think that'll do it for today's show. I'm going to stop the